Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on my Chinese city-style Penjing. The Toronto Bonsai Society gave a few of the club members a bunch of Tiger Bark Ficus cuttings, and they wanted each member to do something different with them. So I created this city-style Penjing this winter, and I've been letting it grow all summer to build up vigor in the trees, to build up the thickness of the trunks. And today I'm going to prune it back. They're getting quite tall and wild looking. I'm going to do some hard pruning on them. And then I'm hoping that the new foliage grows in before it has to go inside for the winter. The two Chinese houses here were sold as planters and they were purchased off the internet. This planting has gone from looking very sparse and not very green looking at all to something very lush over the summer. The moss has grown really tall. The canopies have filled in on the trees. So it's really changed the look of the Penjing. Because the trees are so vigorous and healthy in this planting, when I do go to prune them, they're going to respond very quickly, back budding, generating new foliage. I think you'll see them green up very quickly after the pruning today. I'm standing back now having a look at the planting, and I'm trying to get an idea of the overall shape of the canopy, where I want my tallest trees. I think at the side I want them shorter. You don't want like a rectangle flat across the top, straight at the sides. That never looks interesting. So you want some area where you have your tallest tree, creating forced perspective, so that, the tallest ones will be in the front. But you also have to have like an overall profile to the canopy section. Either steps or, clouds at different heights. Something to break it up. You don't want that rectangular look where it's just flat across the top. That just, never looks good. I definitely want the forced perspective. There's two houses. This one's a larger house and the one in the background is a smaller scale. So that already gives us some perspective. So I definitely want the trees surrounding that back house to be smaller, especially the ones in the background. And the ones up front have to be taller. So I've got basically three, one here, and that group around the horse that are kind of in the foreground. So those will be the highest trees. Then I'll have a medium height trees as we go back, and then the ones in the background will be the smallest. Now the ones behind the house here can't be too small or you won't see them. The house will hide them. So the canopy has to be at least above the peak of the roof of the house. I think for the pruning I want an overall asymmetrical triangle. So this will be my tallest tree in the middle there. So I'll push it kind of to that shape. That kind of gives you an idea of what I'm looking after. And it won't be triangular. I think there'll be steps. So these trees will be one height. This will be the highest one. And the ones on this side will be shorter. So it'll be, roughly form that asymmetrical triangle, but it won't look like a triangle. It'll look more cloudy or rounded steps. I've got the planting on the turntable so I can spin it around easily now. So I'm going to start with this clump. So I've got this one tree up front here I think should be the largest. So I'm going to prune it back. Just kind of reducing the height of that tree first. And this is a rough pruning, so once I've got it pruned down I can come back and take a look at it and maybe reduce it further if I need to. It's better to start a little high, come down in size slowly. These three trees have to have some kind of relationship to each other. So this will be my tallest. The one on the outside of the planting has to be much smaller, so I've got to reduce it back. And I'll start again quite high and decide how far back I want to take it. So that's kind of got the main part. Now I've got to branch out down low here And I think it's got to be fairly compact, otherwise it overhangs the pot. So I've got branching here, but I don't think I want to use it. I think I want to take it back harder. So I'm going to take it right back to here, like that, reducing that branch significantly. And that may still be too long. I'm going to see what happens in this area. If I get some more branching coming out here, then I can reduce that branch back even further. So I'm taking a look at the tree. So this tree looks too tall compared to the one beside it. I've got to reduce it back. I think maybe before I reduce this one back, I'm going to take the third tree in that group back. Pruning it back again, keeping it a little taller at first. And then I can always reduce it back further. Okay, so that's got that front group pruned back. I might even take this one at the back a little further, like that, so it's a little easier to see what's going on, like that. So now I can kind of see what's going on in this area over to the right hand side. So this tree off here can definitely be reduced, and I have a branch coming out the front here which could be the new leader, so I'm going to take it off right here, leaving a bit of a stump for dieback, like that. And there's a good cutting. Now the tree at the back here is quite thick. It's almost as thick as the one out front, and I would prefer it to be a little skinnier to give perspective. So I'm going to have to do some hard pruning on that. It's also too tall. It should be maybe somewhere, maybe even lower than this one here, taking it quite far back. Let me see. I do have a branch coming out here. I could take it right back to there, and I think I will. It's just too tall and it's too thick, so I'm pruning for the future here. So here I go, big cut. Taking the top off and creating a new cutting. That'll be quite nice. So I think it's looking good in that area. This one branch here is a little strong here, so I'm going to reduce it back to here. Maybe even a little further to here. Like that. I think that looks better. And then there's a strong one coming up here. Take that off and reduce this one back too. It's just looking a little imbalanced. I can take, I think this vertical one here needs to be taken back to here, like that. And there's a branch at the back here that's getting too tall. So I'll take it back to here. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Now, this back one still looks too tall. I've got to take it back fairly hard, keeping it a smaller tree in the background, giving me that forced perspective. So I've got this large kind of trunk line coming out kind of off the edge of the pot. I don't like that. I want to cut it back. So I've got to shoot at the back here, right here. So I'm going to cut it just above there. Quite a severe pruning, like that. Now that should look better, I hope. Yes, it does. So I've still got to make this more compact, so I'm going to prune it back harder. Looking for pruning just above leaves that are fanning outwards from the tree. That's much better. That kind of flows in. Looks good, I think. So, next up, I've got the tallest trees are in the middle here. So I've got one out front here that's going to be the tallest tree, and then I have one back here, and the back one is actually a little thicker than the one out front, so I've got to take this one back to reduce the vigor on it. So I'll prune this main tree up here, kind of just making it more compact. And I've got to decide on a height, and I think I'll want to keep a lot of this branching up here, so I'll reduce it probably to about here. Now I think here, I've got this leader here that kind of comes forward, but it's on a back branch. So I have a back branch here that would flow towards the back. So I could take that whole leader off, and I think I will. I think it's getting too thick compared to the thickness of the branches in that area. So I'm going to take that whole top off. So here I go. Like that. Another nice cutting. That lightens the crown up a lot. It looks good. So I'll keep reducing the branches back now. So that's looking much better. You can see that front tree is roughly pruned up. So now I've got to go to the one behind it, which is quite a thick tree. I think that one's going to need a bit of hard pruning. So I'll start by kind of getting them pruned up size-wise. So again, this tallest at the front, if you look in the side view, tallest at the front getting shorter towards the back. So let's start at the back here. I'm going to start reducing it here. So I'll take it off right here. And that cutting off, top off. So that's definitely got this tree shorter. If you look from the side view, you got your tallest, shortest, and even shorter. I still have this one branch coming up here that's very tall. Take that off. Take this one back. And I'm wondering, on this trunk, do I need that V-shaped division there? Could I prune the back one off? I've got to look at that. It would help stop that thickening up so rapidly, because it is getting thicker than the one out front, which I don't want. And you don't really see that back branch from the front view, so I think it's redundant. So I'm going to take it off. So here I go. Big cut coming up. Like that. So there's another good cutting. Good woody one. Okay, let's have a look at it now. Yeah, it looks better. So there's a look at it now. It's looking much better. Take this branch back. I'm going to take this one back. Okay, so I think that's pretty good for that second tree here, but this one's still looking a little tall. So I think I've got to take that back a little further. If I compare it to the one here, I want it a little taller to create that kind of triangular silhouette, but I think it's too tall. So I'm going to take it back to here. Like that. Okay, I think that area is looking fairly good. Has a bit of shape to it. Trees are pruned back. And once all this is done, they're just going to explode in new growth. So they're so vigorous, these trees. Okay, so I think next is to do the tree up front here. So this is my highest point. So I want it kind of getting that triangular silhouette. So I'll start pruning back this tree out front here. Again, trying to get all my branches to flow nicely. So I'm looking at the height of it now, wondering if it's still too tall. I think it is. I'd like it, at least this height or maybe even shorter, because, the triangle is steeper on this side, more relaxed on this side. So I think I've got to take more off. So here I go. I'll take more off of it. There's one branch that this one here comes straight out towards the viewer. I think I've got to take that off. It's kind of bugging me. That looks better. I think it's getting pretty close. There's a look at it. looking pretty good, I think. So now I've got to do the trees behind, and they have to get shorter. So this is my tallest tree on this edge. So this one has to be quite a bit shorter. So yeah, that'll be a challenge. So that's getting there. It's not too bad. It's still a little tall because I got to get that perspective. So I need to reduce it back a little further. So I'll do a hard prune here. Just back here. There. There. Now there's a long branch coming out the back here. I'll just take it off, see what happens. It's got that one pruned back. So next is the tall one behind here. So I think I'll have to prune that kind of to the height of the roof, and then when the new foliage grows in, you'll see it behind there. So I'll want it fairly short. So I'll do a hard prune here, like that. There. That gets that reduced back quite nicely. You can see, you can just barely see it above the building there. Okay, it's time to go up front and have a look at the overall composition now. I'm having a look at the overall composition now. I like the shape of the canopies, having that tallest tree in the middle. I think it looks quite nice. It gives the whole planting a bit of style. Right now they're looking quite bare until those trees fill in. They'll look a little sparse once again, but yeah, I think the overall composition is looking quite nice now. I'm just looking for areas to tweak here. Maybe just a little off the top of the main tree, the highest tree there, just to kind of get a rounded canopy. I think that looks better. I could even take that one vertical section off. Yeah, that kind of gives a better looking canopy on that tree. Okay, so next up, I've got to prune the moss. It's like really thick. There used to be a bridge in here and a little Japanese garden, and the horse used to have legs, and they are still under the moss there. But that's how high the moss is growing. It's going right up to the horse's belly. So some pruning is in order. And because the moss is so thick, I may have no choice but just to strip it all off and regrow new moss. I'll see if I can prune it, but I think to prune it down to the right height, I think it'll just be brown underneath. Let's give it a try though. All right, I've got my curved scissors here, which are good for pruning moss. Let's just start and see what happens here. So it's green so far, by taking a thin layer off. So I could maybe prune it back to the point where it just starts to look a bit brown, and then let it re-green again, and then maybe prune it back further, do it in stages to get it the height reduced. I'll try that. So this Penjing is in the very early stages of development still. It's, you know, not even a year old. And I think it'll take, you know, many years before everything is in place on this. Both my garden in there, all the trees looking miniature, the houses getting a bit of weathering on them. So it'll take a while. My pathway here into the house is completely covered with moss, so I've got to clear that out a bit. Looks like an abandoned house. There's just been no one doing any maintenance on the yard here. I think in front of this house I'll try and create a bit of a moss bush. So I'll come in and kind of prune the moss to a rounded form. I think that'll look pretty good. Kind of already have that a bit. Just help define it a bit more. I kind of like this moss out front, and I'm thinking, you know, I got this moss bush here, maybe this could be like a hedge or something. So I'm going to keep that. I'm going to kind of round it on this natural line here, I'm thinking here, maybe I want to hedge each side of the main path here. That would look kind of cool. So I'll try that. I'll see what I can do there. Kind of clear a bare strip here. I'm going to have to prune my hedge so it tapers down in height towards the house to get that forced perspective. So right now it's kind of a bit shallow at the front, and then it gets thicker and thicker. And if you imagine a person standing here, this edging along the pathway would be almost the height of a person. So I've got to taper it back. So here I go. I'm slowly getting this kind of hedge at the edge of the pathways defined, tapering it. I'm making it kind of slightly rounded and kind of going up and down so it's all uneven. So it kind of looks like a bit of a Chinese dragon, I guess. So I'm getting my garden area cleared out here. So there'll be a path in the garden here. I've got another moss bush defined over here. Working on it anyway. So lots of landscaping. I have got the landscaping all pruned up for today. All my moss bushes in place, my edging along the pathway. There is a lot of areas where there's bare soil, and I'm not going to add like a fine layer of moss to it because I think it'll grow in there all by itself. If it doesn't, I can always add, a fine layer of moss to those areas, but we'll see what happens. This is just a rough pruning today. I think it's looking quite good, I think. I'm very happy with the overall composition. I think that made a big difference, kind of getting that triangular form to the canopy of the forest. And I think once that fills in, it's going to look pretty good, I think. I think it'll put the houses kind of more in the shade. And I think, too, all these moss bushes not out front kind of make that transition between man and nature. Kind of, gives that feeling of, nature but pruned by man. Sort of like bonsai. I'm sorting through all the trimmings, picking out the best cuttings. So I've got two here that have fairly good woody trunks. Here's another one. Has a nice woody trunk. So the fine ones I'm not keeping. I've got a clay pot here that had some seeds in it, but nothing came up. So I'll plant the cuttings in this pot. And you want to plant them fairly deeply. Increases your chance of them rooting. I'll just put them all in the same pot. They'll be kind of crowded in here, but all right, here I go with the water on the cuttings. Give them a good deep water. Let that soak in for a while. Oh, it's draining nicely. I'll give the Penjing a watering too. Make sure it's well watered for today. Let's take a final look at my Chinese village Penjing.
It's time now for today's updates. My first update for today is my Australian umbrella tree. It's doing really well and it's growing lots of aerial roots. Let's go in and have a look at those roots. So you can see the major ones that came off the trunk, and then there's some more forming over here. Just really cool. I love the aerial roots in these Scheffleras. Underneath here you can see all kinds of aerial roots up top there. Right in there. Yeah, so pretty cool. Lots of good stuff happening on this tree. There's some more aerial roots way up there. Yeah, it's very exciting. So the story behind this tree is it was in the greenhouse and I wasn't home and the sun came out and it baked the greenhouse. It got up to who knows what temperature. So it killed all the top of this tree that was exposed to the sun. The only living part was in the shade down here. So there's a dead top to the tree up here, deadwood, and then I've got all these new branches that grew in, kind of like it looks like a hand reaching up. There's 5 trunks on it. So it created a really unique bonsai. I couldn't be happier. I just love all the aerial roots that have grown down into the soil here. Nice and thick. Yeah, so it's not a conventional looking bonsai, but full of interest, and I just love it. The next update is my Vietnam style Ficus microcarpa bonsai. It's looking really good. The top canopy's looking nice and miniature, lots of nice branching on it. I'm going to be working on the root base over the winter, trying to get finer roots and try and make the roots look more miniature. I think the top is getting quite nice on the tree, but the bottom is still in need of more miniaturization. So that'll be a fun project to work on in the winter. Here's a close-up look at those roots. So they're still kind of coarse. They need, finer aerial roots on it. So I may try some techniques with sphagnum moss to try and get finer roots to cover the existing root base. The top of the tree is looking really good. I can't complain about that. So yeah, I just got to get that root base miniaturized and maybe flowing a little better still too. My next update is my edible fig, or Ficus carica, or turkey fig they call it sometimes. It is getting a fruit on top. Here's a look at that fig now. Come up here. There it is, just starting to form. So that's kind of exciting to get a fig on it. My wife has lots on her one. The last update for today is my Ficus microcarpa, the one I grew from seed 29 years ago. I pruned the top of it in a recent video, and you can see it's starting to fill in with new growth. You can see the smaller leaves forming here. So there's quite a mixture of leaves. Some of the older leaves I left on. Some of them are new shoots that I didn't prune because they were tucked in there. So if you were to put this in a show or something, you'd have to leaf prune it. That way all the leaves would come out the same size and color and that. So that's a reason you leaf prune ficus for shows. So everything's looking good on the tree. It has developed quite well over the summer. The root base is getting really, really beefy on it. So there's always more correction I can do on it. I'll be tackling that over the winter also, trying to miniaturize it. But yeah, it's looking good, I think. I had a lot of fun pruning up my Chinese village Penjing. It gives you a chance to be nice and creative, and it was fun pruning the trees and the moss. And that's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.